We don't have the sink in, and we don't have all of the floor done down here, but we've got this countertop done. So I'm going to walk over here and show you what it looks like. See, we don't have any of this painting or any of this kind of stuff over here done. So I'm going to walk. Notice the nice green tiles in the background. Oh yeah, and that's how the grout's going to look once everything is done. Yeah, that's sweet. Okay, so this one, hope you're not dizzy now. This one, we have the tile in, but see how there is like no grout. But at least let's just see what it's going to look like. And I have a really sweet sink. So I'll go in the next room and I'll show you what the sink looks like, because of course it's in the living room. Okay, so now we're in the living room and I will let you look into the sink. This is a granite simulated sink. Oh, that's going to be sweet in there, huh? Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, so can you guess where we are now? We are in Jessica and Luke's new room, but you can't look in the mirror when I kind of swing this around because, oh yeah, it's been painted, but there's so much crap in this room because I'm getting ready for the show. But right here, this is like the sexy bitch dress that I'm going to wear to the reunion. And it's pretty cute, only I'm changing the buttons. So I'm going to turn around and let you see kind of what your room looks like. Now this is the new green shade. Can you see it good? Okay, yeah, I'm blinding you. And there's your closet, but it doesn't have knobs on it. And oh yeah, there's the trash. Oh, thank goodness it's fading. Okay, so this is like the remodel. I will walk you into the laundry room because that's changed too. Can't get too wacky back here because it's, again, a mess, and I had to store everything from the kitchen so I could let you look at that. So it's just all painted. I have nothing else, but I'm going to do Mary Englebright back here. Oh yeah, look at this shelf. Yeah, red and black. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Okay. So I'm getting ready for the show, putting some stuff together. Got to meet Ted. Bye. And I'm a co-author of the Tail Feathers book. I'm also one of the designers for the Delta Paint Company and for Lowell Cornell. So I'm here kind of representing a bunch of different companies. What I really want to do is I want to turn folk art a little bit into faux finishes, because it seems like right now home decor is really hot. And so some of the same techniques that we're using in the folk art and that I've used in the Tail Feathers books can be easily adapted to using on walls or in other places. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. One of the things that I like to do in a demo is like think that maybe you might have had a problem somewhere along the line with a technique. So I'm going to kind of show you the way that I do it, and maybe if you're like always having trouble with side loading or dry brushing or something like that, maybe you'll try a few of these techniques on your own and be able to do them after you've seen the demo. Okay, so we're going to start, and what I want to do is I have this summer insert tray that I did, and it's got like a little bit of a background on this one side that's got some bricks in it. Okay. So bricks are kind of a fun thing to put on a wall to make it a little bit rustic if you have it at home, especially if it's a really crappy wall and it's got a lot of dents and junk inside there and you want to make it look better. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to do a little barrel with apples. So I'll teach you how to do wood and a little bit of metal and a little bit of dry brushing on that too. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I just base coated this with a little bit. Can you see or not? Is this in the way? Okay, I'll scoot that way. All right, you're welcome. Okay, I've just base coated this with a little bit of mudstone, and it's not quite the color that I want my grout to be. So I'm just going to take and I'm going to put a little bit of dark burnt umber, and I'm using Delta paints, and they're just a full line of acrylic paints, and I like them because they have a wide variety of colors. And I'm not sure if you guys know about the little 2-ounce bottles, but a lot of times you get those little paint goobers at the top. So if you spill your paint out the proper way, it will help you save paint. So if you take it and you just hold it straight up and down and give it a little squeeze and then let it go, the paint will go back inside the bottle and you won't have all of that waste. So that's kind of like a little hint for you. And then be sure that you shut your lids tight all the time so that it will save the product too. And when I'm doing a wash, I just want to add a lot of water to a really big brush. When you want to do a wash, use the largest brush that you can for that particular area. And I'm just going to thin my paint down, so it's just going to make it really nice and washy so that I can see through it. And then the important part of a wash too, again, is to touch it on your paper towel. A lot of times you're going to see that you have all this flooding and all these problems when you're working with your washes. If you touch it on your paper towel and you absorb some of that excess, it will help you get through that. So I'm going to take it and I'm just going to do a simple wash over the top here. And I don't really care that it's really nice and smooth because this is just going to be grout for my bricks. So I'm just going to kind of wash it across there, and I can be as sloppy as I want. Can you guys see that, or am I like blocking your view? I'm just really afraid I'm going to knock this thing over. Okay, then what I'm going to do, and you can make your bricks any size that you want them to be. So I just have this little sponge here. Let's say I was going to be doing it on a wall at home. I probably would pick something like this. If I was going to be doing a basket or something at home and needed it smaller, I would cut my sponge smaller. And then again, if I was just painting the tray, which was quite a bit smaller, I would cut this sponge into the size that I wanted. And what's really nice is that they sell compressed sponges like at Michael's. And it's a real skinny sponge, and it doesn't pop up until you wet it, so you can cut it any shape you want. So if you felt like you wanted to have like a little shape or do it a little bit differently, then you would be able to get a compressed sponge and then cut it into the size that you wanted. So I'm just going to take my sponge, and I want to be sure that I work with it a little bit wet. I don't want it drippy because I don't want a lot of drips coming down, but I want to make sure that it's going to be pliable when I'm working with it. And I want to use a bunch of different colors, because if you look at brick, you'll see that it has a whole bunch of different colors in there, and you don't want to have to come back and add those colors back in. So if you just start from the very start and put a bunch of different colors down, that will be an easy way for you to go. So I'm just going to take Santa Fe Rose, and then a darker kind of burgundy. I'm going to use cinnamon. And I'm just placing these right next to each other on the palette, and then a deeper color candy bar. So I'm going to use all three of those colors on here. And then I'm just going to take my sponge, and I'm going to go into each one of those colors. So I'm going to put a little bit of the Santa Fe Rose on, and then I'm just going to kind of smush it, technical term. I'm going to smush that out on here. And then I'm going to take some cinnamon, and I'm going to add a little bit of cinnamon in there. And I don't want it in the same place every time, so I'm just going to kind of smoosh that around so I have a little of each of those colors on there. And then I'm going to go into my candy bar, and then I'm just going to smush it around. So your palette is going to be like a real mess. And this is where you want to work from now on. You're going to work from the colors that you've already created inside here. Because I don't want a pattern. I don't want it to look like I have a particular color in a particular place. So then I'm going to take it, and I'm just going to pinch it so that it fits real good in my hand. And I'm not sure how well this board's going to work, but we're going to try it. And I'm just going to lay it down. And all I've done, if I'm working on a wall, I'll just take and I'll run like a piece of chalk, because then I can spit on it later and then just wipe it off and it will be gone. So I've just given myself a pen line here so you guys can kind of see where my direction is. So I'm going to lay my first brick down there. And a lot of times I'll take and I'll have more than one sponge. So I'll have one sponge that will be this size, and then maybe I'll have one that's a little bit longer, and maybe I'll have one that's a little bit shorter so that I can stagger them when I'm working, but I'm only going to do this one. Then I'm going to take it and I'm going to continue to do that. So I'll just take them and I'll just kind of smash it on there so that it looks like I have that on. And I'm leaving a little bit of grout in between each one. So these are going to be like real perfect bricks. And then I might add a little more of one color and not so much of another color as I go along so that I have some variation in there. One thing you want to be careful of is that you don't just take it and cookie cut straight across, because then you're going to have the same colors all the way across the whole thing. And you want this to be varied. So you're just going to squeeze out paint as you're working and do it in different places so that you're not going to have it all look exactly the same. And this is a real simple way to dress up a wall. And I'm just going to pat that color out. And we'll say that would be our first wall, our first line. So you could come like all the way across. Now, if you didn't have as much color as you wanted on there, you could always go back and pat that straight over, and it would just change your colors a little bit. Maybe you wanted this one to be a little more solid, but probably would go the same direction. Just solid those up maybe just a little, like that. So now it looks like they all are a little bit different. Then you want to start your next row. But the mistake a lot of people make is they come in and they're going to line this right underneath it. Now this is an easy way to make checkerboards too if you want to do a bunch of different checkerboards. But what you want to remember, on checkerboards you would come directly underneath this. But for bricks you won't. You want this to be a little off center. So I'm going to put it this way, because you're going to, when you're laying bricks, you're always going to have your grout in different sections on each line. So I'm going to come in and I'll just lay that next one down. And I'll come back and pat it in again. Lay that next one down. And you can just kind of eyeball this grout. If you're a real type A personality, you might want to get like a little piece of tape and put it between each one and make it really nice. But what you're going to do is you're going to mess up these raw edges. And on brick, you know, it has those little chips and all that other stuff, and you want to have all those characteristics on there. So you want to be sure that you leave some of that. Okay, so let's say I am working on the wall and I get like a little snug, kind of like this here. You can just take a Q-tip. I don't know how good it will work on here, but you can just take a Q-tip and clean that up. Okay? So you don't have to worry about being really perfect. This is kind of a fun thing to do if you have kids at home. You can give each one of them a sponge and have them do their own row. Take that, I'll just lay this one down a little bit more. And you'll see how this one's starting to get like all the same color, because I didn't really get to pat it down into some of the other colors because I'm losing a little bit of the color. Then you're going to wash your sponge out, because this will dry in here and it'll get really hard and crusty, and you don't want that to happen. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, because I want this part of my grout, I want it to show up just a little bit more. So I'm just going to take a liner brush, add a little bit of water to it, and a little bit of my dark burnt umber. And I'm going to come on one side of each one of those bricks. So this is going to be kind of like my shadow. And I won't fill in the whole grout section of it. I'm just going to put it kind of like right next to there, so that it's going to give it just a little bit of an edge on each one. And it's pretty washy. It's pretty thin as I'm doing this. I'm messing up this a lot. So it looks like it's got a little bit of a turn to that. If you wanted to, they're a little bit wet, but if you wanted to, you could take a little bit of straw or even a little bit of your Santa Fe rose and add a little bit of white to it, and then just kind of dry brush back this direction. But I kind of like my grout to look a little bit more, we'll let that dry. I like my grout to look a little grainier. So you can take it with a sponge and put a little bit of your dark burnt umber on it, kind of pat into your color, and then pat off on your palette there. And then in between here, you don't want it to be really dark. You're just going to take and you're going to put it in between here so that it's going to look like now I have a little bit of grout in between. And you could leave a little wider gap in between those. Now let's say you messed it up and you didn't, oh my gosh, I need to have like another gap in there because I didn't get it quite the way I wanted. You can just take your original base color and line that back in. And you want to have kind of a shaky hand. You don't want this to be really smooth. So you're going to take it and you're just going to kind of dab in a little color there so that you're going to have that grout in between. So if you mess it up, there's really an easy way to clean up just about every little mistake that you did. And if you absolutely hate it when you're done, you can always paint the wall back over. It's a little bit wet. You'd probably wait until it was dry, but that would help you clean that up. So this would be a real simple way to do something like that. And then if you wanted to, you could just add some little vines around and make it look a little bit fancier. A little bit fancier if you wanted to. So that's how you would do bricks on a wall, okay? Then now what I want to show you, I want to do a little bit of wood. I have this, I don't know, this kind of fetish thing about doing wood all the time. So in all of the Tell Feathers books, there's always a fence, or there's always a barrel, or there's always something that has some wood on it, because I just have this thing about wood. So we're going to do a little bit of wood and some grain. And one of the neatest things that I've discovered is Lowell Cornell has a brush called a filbert rate. And I'm looking for it here. And this is what it looks like. And if you go by their booth, and I'm going to give you their booth number, their booth is number 185. And you can ask Shirley for the rate brush. I used to use just a regular rake brush, and it had, it was just nice and flat. So it was hard because I couldn't get into the areas that I wanted. And this filbert is rounded, so it will stay right in the center. It's got the longer hairs there, so that when I'm trying to do wood grain and I want to drag these down, it works really nice and easy for that. And the key to that whole thing is making sure that you have some water in your paint. So I'm going to drag a little bit of dark burnt umber first, down on my wood, and I don't have to be real particular about the way that I do that, and I am going to use a little bit bigger brush so you guys can see it. Now when I'm working with this, I'm going to thin out my paint, so I'm going to thin it out by just adding some water. Then I'm going to touch it on my paper towel. Again, that's really an important part of the process. So I'm going to touch it on my paper towel and just absorb a little of that excess. Then I'm going to put some pressure on the brush, and I'm going to open it up this way. So you can see like the hairs, how they're starting to spread on their own right there. If I add some pressure that way, it's just going to open that up. You don't want to get a lot of paint into your ferrule, and that's why we're thinning the paint down as we're doing this. So I'm going to take it, I'm just going to thin that down. And then I can just randomly come back and I'm dragging it. I'm not putting pressure on it. I'm just like letting those hairs lay down as I'm working with it. So I'm just going to take it and I'm going to let it lay down the way that it wants as I'm coming down. And I'm not being real careful about my streaks. You can kind of see how that goes. And I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. And I can be real random with it. If I wanted to make like some wood graining in it, I would just take the brush and I would scoot it over and then come back down and then maybe make a knot. And then I would just come back and fill these little sections in. And then I could come back and I could side load around those sections to make them look a little bit more defined. But I'll just add some wood graining on here. Kind of coming back. And you can do this pretty quick. If you want to add a little gel medium or extender in there so that it stays wet a little bit longer, I'm not a real patient painter. I'm kind of like instant gratification. I want that done and dry right now so I can get to the next step. So I don't use a lot of extra mediums or anything in there. So this is kind of stripy, but I wouldn't want it quite that stripy. Just going to add, so I have a little color in there. Then what I want to do is I want to come back and I want to redefine my sections of where my slats for the barrel are going to be. So I'm going to take a little bit of my trail tan, and I like to do my highlights first a lot of the times, and you can either side load this in or you can dry brush it in, and I'm going to show you both techniques so that you'll know how to do each one. I always use a nice wide brush, a nice flat brush when I side load. When I very first learned how to paint, I did all of my side loading on a slant or an angle brush, and I had trouble doing some walkout blending or getting things as wide as I wanted them to be. So once I learned how to do it with the flat brush, it was a lot easier for me. So some of you guys who are stuck on that angle brush and have a little trouble doing the tornado blends and some of that other stuff might want to try a flat brush. I'm going to show you my technique. I wash out and I pat my brush on one side, just lightly pat it on the other side. Now when I say pat, I don't mean pat, pat, like so quick that I'm not taking any water out. And I don't mean take a nap, take a nap. What I'm saying is I want you to pat it just lightly on there, and what I'm doing is I'm watching the sheen of my brush. I'm trying to leave some water in there, but I don't want it to be so washy that I'm not going to be able to see it, okay? So I wash out, pat on one side, pat on the other side, and then I wipe off my ferrule. And that's really important because a lot of times what's going to happen is if you have too much water in here, it's going to run down on your ferrule and then it's going to flood out the side load that you're trying to create. So always just kind of wipe off your ferrule with your hand. Then I'm going to take and I'm just going to roll my brush towards my body. If I'm right-handed or left-handed, it doesn't make any difference. I'm just going to roll my brush this long way. And I'm just going to skim over my puddle. So I'm going to just get a little bit of paint on there just like this. Then I'm going to take and have my handle straight up and down, and I'm going to lay this down flat and give my eye a line to look at. So once I have that first line on there, I'm going to continue to go back and forth down that line. So I'm going to just put this on my demo board so it's a little easier. So I have this first line down. Now my second line coming down, I'm going to lay my brush down so that I'm right up against it, and I'm going to pick that paint up again. Then I'm going to lay my brush and I'm going to do it again. Now you'll notice my handle is straight up and down. I have a lot of mobility if my handle is straight up and down. The minute that I slant my brush, I lose all mobility. It's just like with lining. So I want to keep my handle straight up and down. So I blend it, then I come back and I blend it again, and then I blend it again. And I'm not so much worried that I have a ridge on this side. What I'm worried about is if you have an eye dominant problem, you're going to lay your first line down, and then you're going to come here and you're going to do this, and then you're going to come back and you're going to do this, and you're not going to be able to get a good blend. So if you notice that happening, you probably just have one eye that's a little bit stronger than your other eye. What you're going to do is you're going to stay to the right of that line. So when I lay that first line down, I'm going to lay that down and I'm going to stay over here. So by the time when I flatten my brush out, I can work back over to that line. And then I'm going to lay it down and do it again. And I'm going to keep doing that until I have that dark to light achievement of color that I want. If you see it on your palette and you like it, when you put it on your piece, you're going to like it. If you put it on here and you hate it, you know when you put it on your piece, you're going to hate it. So just wash out and load again. Then I'm going to take it, and since this is going to be on the highlight side, I would have my dark on this side creating my shadow, and my highlight will be on the front. So I'm just going to take it, my color is always where my thumb is, and I'm just going to lay it down. Now, in this case, you don't always want to go back and blend this and play with it because you'll mess it up. Because this board is so dry, and a lot of times you're going to have that happen, I want to show you how to do a wet blend, okay? So this would be like a wet on wet. I'm going to do the exact same load that I just did, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down a little bit of water on here. And I don't want it soppy dripping. I just want it a little bit wet so that I can manipulate the color. I'm going to do the same blending procedure that I did on here in the way that I loaded my brush, just nice and flat. Then when I put it on here, I can be as messy as I want. I'm just going to take it and I can just slop that on here. And I want to be sure that I've curved this a little bit and I've got enough color and I can kind of walk that out a little if that's the way that I want it to be. Then I'm going to take a mop brush. And I don't swish this back and forth. What I want to do
Oh, everybody helps you pick up frames. How's that? Together. No, whenever somebody finishes a word, you know. As far as design in decorative painting, we kind of have a little break because design, we don't have to follow all the design rules because we're both artists and you're doing decorative painting. So we aren't trying to be, realistic and create pieces in the real traditional way. But the design framework can be so helpful. And the more that I started studying design, the more it helped me when I was looking for something to fix or to use as a structure. So that would be my suggestion for you on how to use design, is use it kind of as a framework, or when you're looking for an element of something that doesn't work or you wish was a little different, go back and look at your design principles. And are we doing that now? Oh, good. I almost skipped a fun activity. So you want to go back and look at some of your design principles when, for that purpose only. I would not say that you need to take this section and sit at home and look at it for every one of your design things. If when you're done with your design and you say, did I use complementary colors, or I wish this would be cinched up a little bit, those kinds of things, that's what I would suggest that you use it for. And we're going to go through a lot of it. There's a brief section, and I tried to give you an application of how the actual framework might be applied, because a lot of it, the fine art design sections get a little more artsy. Sorry, Jessica. And sometimes they're not as useful for me, and I just kind of have to figure out how would be most useful for me. But before we do that, we have a fun activity back at the table, and I think we actually only want to use 3 tables. Because we want bigger groups to it. Yeah, we could. Yeah, so let's do design. Or it can mean the place where 2 things come together. So the line where 2 things meet. Okay? And how you use that element is going to really change your design. And I want to show you some ways that I'm talking about. A sketchy, rough sketchy line, obviously like on these beads, gives you a fuzzy look. Where if you have a sharp, crisp edge, like on the flower, that is a whole different feel or different look to your drawing. But I also want to show you the line of the grass. And see in the back they have grass that's just real washy and just faded in, and it gives you background. That's a different kind of line. It just blends into the background. It's real subtle. And then they have a few that have a harder line up front. Okay? So the type of line that you use really affects your painting. A lot of Giselle's paintings, this is one of her designs, a lot of line, a lot of crisp lines, a lot of layers in her designs. Today this is a project that I taught, one of my demo boards, and it's a real loose frilly line, and some of the ladies had a hard time. They wanted the edge of the flower to be, real crisp like we're used to with a flow. This is a real different fluffy feel because when I put fairy dust, we put fairy dust over the top, like down in here, that kind of softens everything. So that's a different line, a different way to use line. And so sometimes when you just need to change something in your drawing, or just it's not, like this grass, if we did it all the same, it would be a totally different effect and a real flat effect than if we used that background, that loose grass in the back, and just a few crisp lines up front. So you can think of different ways to use line to change your paintings. Pen and ink stuff always has real sharp lines, and then the lighter things, the lighter element of color. So the line is a big part of that drawing. Karen Ortman's, this has a real soft line where the colors come together to sort of blend into each other, and they give you a really different effect. A soft look a little more realistic, a little, even though maybe you're not going for actual realistic paintings, but you want it to have a little more realistic feel. Loosen up your line structure, let your colors blend together a little more, and now you get a different feel of it. And I'm going to touch a little bit of shapes. So when you're putting a painting together, there are 3 different kinds of shapes according to the design elements. There are geometric shapes. So circle, square, triangle are your geometric shapes. of course, then you have to open it up. I think for decorative painting, you have to add hearts and stars as just a given shape to work with. Okay? And then there are natural shapes, shapes that we find in nature, like the shape of a leaf, the shape, of a general shape of a flower. Those kinds of things are natural shapes. And then we have abstract shapes. And those are the kind of shapes that we find that don't have a given shape. We might not find that exact scrolling shape in nature. But it's something that decorative painters use all the time. We create a shape, that means a tree. Okay? Some of our shapes are a circle and a trunk, and that's our tree in a lot of that old folk art. So, shapes in your painting, if you use all the same shape, it's going to have a totally different feel than if you vary your shapes, okay?